design is as old as humankind, and there is, no question about it. Once again, the moment people will start making their own tools, from those tools being knives or chairs, or they're just tools to improve life and make sure that you can sit, eat, enjoy talking to other people and sleep and all that. So, and that was all about answering people's needs. And then something happened, which I think in a way could be called also industrial revolution, and then the need that things had to be produced in a way that would answer the mass market, and technology and marketing start calling for big numbers. So you cannot just produce a few items or a few objects. You need to produce enough to justify why you need such a big infrastructure. So it's about mass production, and mass production is often requiring that you standardize solution, so that solutions can not just be good for 1, 2, 3 people, but they kind of reach out and they're good solutions for a number of people that should be big enough to justify the cost of it, right? That's kind of the meaning of standardization and so on.
In the perfect world, design is what sells the product. I know there's also a price issue, and also, of course, the form factor, which is also, I think, design. But in terms of the overall service experience, if designers have done their work and listened to what the end users want, it should sell.
The size and the sort of impact of what you do is definitely changing. Especially there's a whole new wave of like democratizing design in a new different way. So no longer are the designers the sole entity or the only person who decides what to do, and then that's the way it's done. But rather it's becoming more and more collaborative in nature, and lots of factors influencing design processes today.
It seems a little, okay, so if you buy the notion that design is moving away from being something which primarily deals with creating beautiful things and things that are intuitively feel good, look good, etc., into being more like let's create things that are useful and that will maybe even save the world. There are some parts of the design world that tend to think that that's the new role of design is to save the world from illness, from global warming, from whatever. So it seems like there's this shift from beautiful things to useful things.
I don't know, this idea of being, I think it has a lot to do with fashion and being sometimes perceived as people who are good at creating and setting the taste of the next generation of things to be produced and so on. So this idea of being a little bit of the exclusive, fashionable, kind of celebrity-like kind of people, that's something that it takes time to kind of get rid of that value or even brand that we have created around ourselves. But I'm not sure, once again, it's a mistake. I think it's just like the way things are, and that's just part of the evolution of what design is today.
If you say designers are something that configures something, work with emotion, work with material, functionality, it's just that now, before you had maybe, you might say, if you say 10 tons of material, now you have 1 million tons of material. So in terms of that, you might have more niche orientated designers, rather than I'm a designer of everything. It could be that you're a designer of a very small little portion of a product.
There isn't a clear model, but one of the things that I feel would change or would evolve in the very near future is a lot of sort of collaborative self-design initiatives will be there, where there will be no one sort of elitist design person kind of telling how things would be made or how things should look like, but more it'll have a sort of bottom-up and more, you could say, humanistic approach to design.
So there's also this notion that once you design something, it's not a standalone product anymore. it's an ecosystem. So it's actually how do you design, you might say, a more of a, how is it, my kind of a life cycle. You might say either a product life cycle, or also kind of, I don't know if you can call it a people life cycle, or because there's so many devices that you interact with.
The pace that, in a way, technology has created is not taking into account the time that is needed for cultures to change, and also the cultural expectations of people to change. So the technology has been sometimes very, very quick, maybe too quick.
So I think in terms of needs within the media technology space, I think a lot of them will center around how do you get the most relevant things to people in the right way. And obviously the big catch on that is also that there's a lot of overlap with that and then advertising, which is where the money will come from, because if you can figure out what people want in terms of media, you can probably also figure out what kind of products to push to them, and maybe you can even figure out to do it in a nice way that is not that intrusive and irrelevant. Who knows? Maybe that's the positive vision.
Talking about the new role and mindset of designers, how do they cope with this technology dependency? That, well, it might break down, it might not work as they intended to. I don't know.
And technology is evolving so fast today that design has to keep up with that in so many ways. And the combination of design practice with socio-technological trends is what gives it an extra edge, and that has global implications, and understanding what those trends are is pretty important, and sort of incorporating design practice within that kind of thinking is what will give us a new level of achievement in design thinking and implementation.
I would actually say it's definitely an opportunity. It's a damn hard opportunity because it's such a delicate area. And like I call it, you need to design a value interaction. Because if you start tampering with the light switch or the microwave or the stove or something like that, you need to make an interaction that's valuable, both to me as an end user, but also to the company like Siemens or whoever puts in the new technology.
Design education is often grounded in very kind of crafts and arts, and historically that's like the nature in terms of education. So how can we now design and shape curriculum that better answers what is really needed to be performed by design, which doesn't mean that arts and crafts should be dropped, not at all, but definitely design has also evolved to a kind of less artistic kind of approach, and that's the challenge.
The way design education has been sort of evolved in the last 100 years or so, it came from like sort of the arts and crafts movement, and then sort of evolved into industrial design in the way it is interpreted today, and then slowly it's transforming to other forms today. But I think the fundamental way of balancing or combining form and aesthetics with functionality and things like that are basic to any design practice. But I think there is one fundamental thing that design education and designers in general are not good at, is in creating more collaborative and sort of cross-organizational way of thinking.
I think one thing that has been interesting in working with designers is that I find that in general they have a nice way of attacking sort of or looking at objects or things. So where I come from my background, a social science background, normally you would look at a thing and then you would ask yourself, so by looking at this thing, how can I, what will that thing tell me about the way that people use it? What will it tell me about, how they use pens in Japan versus how they use pens in Tanzania?
It might be part of the design that you can hack the building, or you can hack the product, so that in that way you might integrate the end users in part of the design of the product. And also like what happens if all these people is leaving their, you might say, personal footprint at a greater scale.
At the same time, we should combine that kind of industrial capacity with an attitude that normally is the attitude that craftsmen have in just customizing the solution and making sure that solutions are very, very specific for individual people. So I think that's like an interesting balancing act where also designers and design can play a role, and technology can now enable mass-produced solutions which are carrying very kind of customized values and qualities.
There's also the notion that how can you create open platforms, again, where people can design their own stuff, you might say. I still think kind of professional designers will win by the end of the day in terms of what will sell and what's the better experience. But having open platforms where people can design their own services and product is definitely a huge sandbox, you might say, where you can find new talent that didn't know that they had talent.
Sometimes visualizing the future, showing what they think could be like, prototypes, or let people experience and try out the new solution, can be a way to convey the message in a good way, but also convince them to adopt the change, rather than just being scared about this kind of green strategy that we all have to kind of agree on and follow.
The next big challenge would be to think about how to integrate design as a practice in organizational systems, in sort of more service elements and bigger sort of issues in life today.
Once I heard that 90% of designers and design is dedicated to 10% of the population, something like that, which shows that actually what we are doing, what has been done so far, has reached out just like a very small part of the whole, kind of globe and society. So probably the next challenge is how can we scale up the impact of the design work to reach out, to possibly reverse the rate and have 90% of designers reaching out the 90% of people out there and trying to bring more values to more people.